creation, dissemination, and use?
Thank you very much. So I've been asked to bring to the fore a few topics within content creation and use, and I'm going to talk about digital preservation and copyright in that context of content. Now, I'm speaking on behalf of libraries, and libraries love content. We love everybody involved in its creation, including publishers. We need it, or else we're going to become irrelevant, and we know that creators love content too. They love content too because they build new stuff out of what's gone before, and creators love being able to get hold of that old stuff so they can build something new. But as we all know, there is an awful lot of new digital content these days, and we're not talking here about the print materials that libraries are digitizing, but there's a lot of born digital material of all kinds that's massively increasing year on year. Now, libraries have traditionally played a role in collecting, preserving, and making this content available. But I think the controversial question that I wanted to think about here was, can we actually keep up? Can libraries, can other cultural institutions adequately support content creation, dissemination, and use? And I'm tempted to say that maybe we can't. Because right in the middle of this global content explosion, I think we're actually in danger of having a massive black hole right in the middle of our cultural record. And the reason for this is because the problem seems to be that in order for us to fix this big black hole, in order for us to fix things relating to digital preservation, we need to fix copyright. Now, as anyone who's ever tried to fix copyright will tell you, there's going to be problems with that, big problems, dirty tricks probably, accusations, recriminations, possibly blood. This is a big deal, and it's very frustrating, because IFLA is of the opinion that the international copyright framework today cannot deal with the challenges that we face. We have been placing more and more emphasis on enforcement over the last few decades and very little on flexibility. From the library perspective, there are countries around the world that do not have any legal framework for library activities such as preservation or lending, and it leaves library workers there very unsure if what they're doing is legal or not. We have very few countries around the world that have electronic legal deposit laws. And in other countries, particularly developed countries, we do have copyright exceptions which enable us to preserve content, but they're actively undermined by contracts and licenses. This means that we're becoming to a point where libraries and other institutions cannot share content across borders. We can't truly take advantage of the information dissemination opportunities that the internet offers us. I would like to say that this isn't just about libraries. The bottom line is that this situation does not bode well for the creation, dissemination, and use of all digital content, whether it's local or not.
Stuart, could I ask you one question about this? If you sort of foresee the discussion in the main session about this, what would be your ideal outcome? Would it be sort of some sort of best practice for libraries world, how to deal with this, how to approach the legislator? What would you want to see as an outcome?
IFLA itself has a very clear outcome. We're working at the World Intellectual
Use. There are still many millions of people who are not connected, and there is no one-size-fits-all in terms of access. In the areas that I work in, which is developing Asia, most access is over mobile platforms. In the last month, in Myanmar, which is one of the least connected countries in the world, 1 million people got connected wirelessly on 3G networks, using SIMs that can only work with 3G, not 2G. So the great majority of people are coming in on wireless platforms. Several years ago in Sharm el-Sheikh, when I raised this issue at IGF, there was a degree of surprise. But today this is to be taken for granted. So if we think of internet as a chain, the chain is defined by the weakest links. Today, one of the weakest links is the last mile that is connecting the subscriber, the user, because there are problems that governments have in giving enough spectrum. And that needs to be addressed. I would say that's one of the most important issues. There's been a lot of progress made in the backhaul, domestic as well as international backhaul, putting in the big pipes that will take the data around fast. But we have to make some additional movement in making sure that the access is non-discriminatory, cost-oriented. And lastly, the net neutrality debates that play out in the West, in the developed world, play out differently in our parts. For our people, the most important thing would be how it...
And fixed in the U.S. and a provider of enterprise services and global internet networks around the world. So with that background here, I would take off from where Rohan spoke in terms of connecting the world. I want to talk just about two topics very briefly: connecting the world and then using the internet for the growth and development. So a lot of progress indeed on connectivity, not everyone, but nonetheless very good directionally. Some of the questions are still about remote areas or about, I think, connectivity within regions. We have a lot of backhaul and international, but connectivity within regions. Now, looking at that, it of course requires investment. And therefore, that takes one very quickly to the question of having an enabling environment and public policies that will enable investment to do all of that. The other thing that is ever more important is the demand side, the use of these networks, and that's something I've been struck with even in the last day in the conversations here, which is now we're talking more about how to find and enable the good ways to benefit from all of that. Transformation like telemedicine, distance learning. I was struck by your 7 million students and what can be facilitated there through more and more internet. Mobile banking, cloud services, and Internet of Things. There will be workshops on many of those particular topics that I think are
has its own way of handling the question of investing in infrastructure.
Well, there's certainly a lot of range. I think that the theme of no one size fits all, and you have to do things tailored, fit for purpose, local purpose is true. On the other hand, we have seen the proliferation of independent regulators, the recognition of competition as important. That's on the infrastructure side. On the demand side, I think the interesting thing is that we're now having to have relationships that are much more, shall we say, multi-stakeholder in nature, because there's the need for input by users. There's a need for, maybe on the government side, the Ministry of Communications to talk to the Ministry of Education, to talk to the Ministry of Health, to figure out how to do these new uses.
So there's more cooperation within governments who are affected or involved in infrastructure investment, but also more cooperation between governments and private sector.
I think that the multi-stakeholder values and ways of doing things that we've been using or looking at for 9 years now at the Internet Governance Forum are increasingly used. That's a great thing. We
recognize Internet governance as the overall combination of actions and activities undertaken by the various stakeholders that participate in Internet governance. Those are governments, of course, private sector, civil society, academy, technical community, international organizations, each working according to its role and responsibilities. And then we are talking about a concept that has national dimension, regional dimension, global dimension. So I will not dare to try to speak on the evolution of all those, the constellation of so many processes and fora that deal with Internet governance, but I rather the role that was envisaged back in the WISIS meeting 9 years ago, that it could serve as a forum for discussion of all issues of interest for Internet governance, for open discussion, a forum through which the global community understood as this combination of governmental and non-governmental sectors could reflect on issues of interest for internet governance and be able to influence on processes and decisions being made. Been fully involved in IGF through our Brazilian Steering Committee, that is a multi-stakeholder body that governs internet in Brazil. And we have a very particular interest in strengthening IGF, besides being convinced of the importance of the multi-stakeholder approach. Since we will be hosting next year IGF in Brazil, this will be the last edition of IGF in this cycle that was decided upon back in 2005. Well, actually, it was for 5 years and then extended for a new 5 year. So there will be, we plan to have the meeting in Brazil, and by the end, that I have been stressing in many different settings, discussions here, is the need to maybe forge a better relation between multi-stakeholder process, and IGF embodies this idea of with the more intergovernmental process. As a diplomat, I am very much concerned that what we do here has maybe a limited influence in intergovernmental negotiations, thinking about the New York discussions and others. So our understanding is that it would be beneficial for the system as a whole if there would be a better dialogue and interaction between what we do here.
Information administration and TIA, which is connected to the US Department of Commerce, and ICANN, which is the IANA functions operator. I think that the debate gets a little bit complicated because there are many actors that are in the play. They play different roles. You have ICANN, for instance, that is a policymaker for the DNS, so it has a policy development process. So every time that a new GTLD is created, for instance, it goes through a process inside ICANN. When decisions are made, then IANA is the one that is going to operationalize that, and it does that 98. There are documents from the US government that are mentioning this process of transferring the stewardship of the IANA functions, but this not happened so far. And I think that the political environment has changed since last year. There was a statement issued called the Statement of Montevideo by the ISTAR.
Has been completed.
Well, I think that it is clear that one of the conditions for the transition is that it should not be a government-centric or a government-led plan. But of course, there are different tensions inside ICANN, for instance. So right now, the role of the GAC is being discussed again. What is the weight of the GAC in the policy development process? There is a trend that I think that is a positive one to try to involve the GAC early.
An activist, maybe I'm camouflaged as an academic here. But the idea is making sure that human rights is something that touched me personally, and I feel that it's no surprise to see that most of the biggest chunk of workshop proposals were in the direction of internet and human rights. The idea behind human rights spans through many aspects, including access, child rights, crimes even, the privacy, as you may recall, surveillance is one of the merits of why certain things are bad for you and why we should begin considering awareness campaigns, ideas that change the way you think of internet content. And that's one important aspect. Another important aspect is to consider the multi-stakeholderism aspect of the internet as something we can learn from. In fact, I was one of the MAG members of the Arab Internet Governance Forum in Algeria, and we had an interesting debate. We were sitting on the panel with activists, government officials, private sector, and technical community, and for the first time, governments felt threatened. They shouldn't be feeling threatened because if they had not done anything wrong, why would they be threatened? The idea is that for the first time, the internet opened the door for us, and other institutions, local, as well as government bodies, managed to understand that perhaps we need to have a paradigm shift. Human rights needs not to adapt. I mean, the internet is not something that we need to adapt our old rules for, but in fact, it is the source of inspiration for us to change our regular lives and change the way we think of things. So that's where I come from, and obviously, I've not touched on the practical matters because luckily Joy here will deal with those aspects.
Can I ask a question first? What would you say if I say a traditional human rights expert would say to you, governments are the ones who have to protect human rights. Those are the ones to be held accountable. They are the ones that need to help us in exercising our human rights, and multi-stakeholder approaches rather sort of blur this role. And
I mean, in fact, if you need to extend.
Is it really so groundbreaking that we would affirm something that's we've already agreed many years before? I think the key question at the moment, the subtext, if you like, for these sessions during the IGF is, what is it that multi-stakeholder groups want to say to those institutions outside the IGF about human rights and the internet? So if we look, for example, at the analysis of workshops in these two streams, we see that at least maybe 47 out of 87 workshops at this IGF relate to the internet and human rights. In the Enhancing Digital Trust area alone, we've got 11 workshops focused on privacy and surveillance. Stakeholders in this IGF. We are focusing this also on the roundtable for workshop organisers in the Enhancing Digital Trust and the Internet and Human Rights. A roundtable on Friday, this Friday, to look at, is there a message that the IGF participants might want to send to the Human Rights Council, particularly because the Human Rights Council is next week on Friday 12th having a session on human rights and private, in other words, an offering of something from the IGF experience to others who are focusing on this issue. And I'm thinking in particular of the Human Rights Council, because the High Commissioner for Human Rights has said we need multi-stakeholder input. They need guidance, they need help. The question is, are we willing to offer that, and if so, what form might it take?
Okay, thank you very much, Joy. We will now have Susan talking about IANA.
Thank you very much. Just to follow on the intervention of Marilia, I'd like to give the audience a bit of information on the IANA main focus session, as well as the workshops that will feed into a stewardship, whatever it may be, should also feature the safeguard in the event that ICANN ever fails in its accountability. So it's an announcement of the transition. The NTIA made clear that the transition proposal must have broad community support and address 4 principles. Accountability was not included with those 4 principles. The community, however, has called for accountability to be addressed, and ICANN responded. Further, this morning, Larry Strickling from the NTIA made it clear during the town hall meeting that although accountability was not initially linked to the transition, they are now very much. This workshop will examine ICANN accountability and transparency mechanisms, as well as the globalization of ICANN and the transition of NTIA's stewardship of the IANA functions. And finally, workshop number 114, Developing Countries' Participation in Global IG. This workshop is organized by the non-commercial stakeholder group of ICANN and will take place on Thursday, September 4th from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. in workshop room 5.
Susan, I think this is too much detail.
Okay.
If we would do that for all workshops, we would spend probably the entire day on it. Tell people about the color code so that they are able to identify the workshops. Okay.
The color code for everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
Came from Net Mondial. Net Mondial, with some difficulty, found some compromise language, and it said the discussions should be carried on in other forums, such as the IGF. So for the IGF, this is, I think, very important, the recognition that Net Mondial actually saw the IGF as a venue for continuing the discussion, which was nothing but was far from conclusive in Sao Paulo. And several speakers around the table have pointed out to passion surrounding some of the issues. Understandably, human rights is always an issue that much passion goes into, but also copyright, as Stuart mentioned, is an issue where people invest lots of feelings and passion, and net neutrality is an issue where as much passion is invested in. It may sound surprising, it is essentially a very technical issue, but people care passionately about it. Either they're in favor or against, but I can assure you there is a lot of passion devoted to this. We had a very open preparatory process with mailing lists, various calls on this, and we came up with a structure which may look rather complex and complicated. We will look at illustrates that this is an issue people really care about. But we will look at the first and foremost at the Net Mondial language as a starting point for framing the discussion, and I read this out. On net neutrality, it says it is important that we continue the discussion of the open internet, including how to enable freedom of expression, competition, consumer choice, meaningful transparency, and appropriate network management, and recommend that this be addressed at forums such as the next IGF. So we're going to discuss all this tomorrow. Now, do we expect closure of the debate tomorrow?
That would have been my question, of course. You're answering my question because I had a chance.
I don't think we can realistically expect that we all sing Kumbaya at the end and we say we agree on how we should deal with this issue. But I do hope that we move closer to a common understanding of what we are talking about. And then there may be, or one of the questions actually related, what is, the question came in from the diffuse, the tension, and if that can be done on an empirical basis, all the better. I mean, we have to, and again, the brings all these people with different perspectives together. So I think it is well placed for this discussion. If you hold a debate only in a technology environment, then you lack the other perspectives.
Before we ask the last two people to present, give us an overview of streams of workshops, the idea was to now finally give the floor
itself with some numbers and about participation in internet governance in general. It's a focus is social participation. So
thank you.
If you have time, just to finish, if we have time, it depends on the people attending the workshop. We intend to have a hands-on session on creating a consultation closer to the consultation we had in Net Mundial. But it's if there is interest and if we have time, it's short time.
So thank you very much. Actually, we thought we would discuss what we've heard so far instead of expanding the information. So are there any concrete questions about the main sessions and roundtables that we introduced in this session?
Thank you, Henriette from APC. I have a question for Walid. Do you think that governments that ban social networking platforms like Twitter and Facebook and others, do you think they are aware of the fact that they're not achieving their goals? Or do you think they are actually achieving their goals? It just reflects, it occurs to me that some...
To do in Yemen, for example, is to introduce the national IGF, and the government has been happy. I mean, they've not been given the opportunity to learn what it's about, and maybe that's reflected mostly in developing countries. I'm not sure if the same ignorance is in developed countries. I hope not. But the idea is that without this introduction to decision makers and policy makers, we will still have this quarrel between what can be achieved and what should be achieved.
Sí, gracias.
There was another question in the back. Yes, please.
Gracias. Arturo Bregaglio, desde Paraguay. Para el expositor sobre Internet y derechos humanos. En los comienzos de los años 90, hubo un señor que escribió la perestroika y le puso un moño al fin de la Guerra Fría. No tenía en ese entonces la posibilidad de Internet. ¿Usted no cree, como expositor y experto en estos temas que los gobiernos tienen hoy la posibilidad de usar esta formidable herramienta para asegurar la gobernanza y ser más creíbles y, como decía aquel señor en el año 90, hacer del mundo un hogar común?
Thank you very much. If there are no other comments, I would then ask Subi to briefly
intervention and convey their thoughts and processes. So a lot is happening in the internet ecosystem. It is evolving. There are many processes that have been initiated across different fora. This is the session where we hope that we can merge and create bridges between silos. So whether it is the ITU or the WSIS Plus 10 review process, or at UNESCO, the UNGA resolution, or the WSIS review modality, we hope that leaders and people who speak at this fora can come and talk about their initiatives at this main session, and how is it that we can together deal with identifying issues and challenges for the evolving ecosystem, and also look at mapping issues with solutions, and how is it that their individual input was put out by the Secretariat for policy questions that this session should speak to and address. There are about 17 workshops, as I mentioned. The first one is just concluded, and if you go up on the schedule, you will see the other 17. Tomorrow is a good day, about 8 workshops, and followed by Friday, again, 6 more workshops. We'd be around, we'd be happy to respond to any questions that you might have, but this really goes to the heart of the matter. How is it that we can strengthen IGF? How is it that we can create outcomes and takeaways from the IGF? And what is it that we can do as a community to together build, create, enable? Thank you.
Thank you, Subi. Just one question. Are there any questions from remote participants? Okay, thank you. Then we will finally have Virat, who will talk about access.
Thank you. Henriette and Jeanette, we're out just at the time of lunch, so I'll try and cover this in 3 parts. One, why is it that we are covering access and internet as an engine for growth, which is a continued theme since 2006, when the first IGF was held in Athens. The second part talks about the main session and some of the workshops that are going to be held. And the last portion, I'll try and close quickly by doing the color coding and how you can select the workshops. Before I begin, a quick show of hands. Are there any first-timers here for the IGF? Because I just want to moderate a few. So I will go slow and make sure that you can follow that part. So let me first say, why are we doing this? Why do we have access and internet for growth as an important theme that was originally conceived at the IGF, first IGF in Athens? At the time of the first IGF in Athens, there was 1 billion internet users in 2006. Today in 2014, out of the 7 billion global population, 3 billion, according to the ITU, will have access to internet in one form or the other, which means 60% of the world's population is yet to understand, see, or experience internet in any way or form. Everybody who's represented here actually does not truly represent people who are not in this room. We are all people who have access to internet. I'm sure there are groups which talk about those who don't have access, but that's a huge group of people who are currently, nowhere near getting access for the next couple of years. 75% of Europe has internet access, 65% in Americas, but in Arab states it's only 41%. Asia Pacific, 32% of the citizens have access to internet, and Africa merely 19%. Of the total households in the world, only 44% have access to internet. In Africa, it's particularly down at 11%. Thankfully, out of the 3 billion internet access that currently exist, 2.3 billion are on mobile broadband. 55% of those are in the developing countries. I can go on with numbers on the impact of this on GDP and why we have picked up the whole issue of development, because that's really important. This is the reason why we drove to combining the themes of development and access into a single main session that will be held tomorrow morning in this room here at 9:30 a.m. The session has participations from nearly 15 countries. It has speakers from ITU, UNESCO, UN Commission on Science and Technology and Development, Turkey, who's going to provide the chair, Nigeria, Kenya, Egypt, South Africa, Lebanon, Argentina, Brazil, China, India, Sri Lanka, Pacific Islands, US, and Europe. It's probably the largest group of people who are going to talk about internet access. Let me just close by saying that if you can just request the gentleman there to go to the color coding. Excuse me. Could you take the screen to the color coding, please? Yeah. So this is at the end of the schedule. If you just read through the schedule.
Interpretation time is over. We really need to come to closure. Can you just finish?
Well, this is it. I mean, I started after the lunch was over. So if you can just go to, this is the last session. If you, at the end of the schedule, if you look at the colors, that will tell you which session to attend. This up on the screens now. I can take you through this, but it's easy for you to see. These colors tell you which sessions you want to attend. It's the end of the schedule, and that's how you can select your sessions. On access and development, there are 26 sessions in all, 10 on access, 16 on development. Thank you.
Thank you, Virat. I'm sorry to be so impolite. Now I hand over to our chair and ask him to close the session.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman and Ms. Eserhaysen. I think this was an extremely useful session which has set the scene nicely for the rest of the week. We hope that you all take with you the insight and background information you have learned today into the various workshops and sessions this week that you are most interested in. With these comments, I conclude the Setting the Scene session. I thank our moderators and the participants for valuable discussions. On my side, reach independently to internet is a critical part of the human rights. I call the session closed and pass the microphone to Mr. Masango of the IFG Secretariat.
I'm afraid Chengetai is not here. So since our time is over anyway, we regret that we cannot give the word to Chengetai, and I wish all of us a nice lunch. Thank you very much.
As I've been 27 years professor of economy from the economic policies, I work very hard for the development side for the government too. That's why it could be really interesting to share your ideas. Exactly.
Yeah. Just wanted to give you my card.
Thank you.
Always great to meet you.
I give you my card.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
You stay in touch.
It's a pleasure.
We should have earlier. I'm not sure whether it's I mean, it's too much information. If we just
Just another meeting at the university.
Thank you very much.
So I think then it could have worked, but combining it with the overview of the workshops and the themes. That doesn't. Just discussing the themes, I think could have worked. But doing I'm sorry that
I thought this was about us bringing them themes. I didn't realize this is
well, I think that what we didn't know, we thought you would introduce the workshop.
I think I said it's
Again, just what I say, not too bad how you did it. It's a good session.
I have given 5 minutes. Right? I spent only 3 hours interrupted. I have planned everything in the 5. I have to explain why this thing.
We said beforehand that we would shut this down. We didn't do that.
But I wasn't even explained.
Let's
be careful about it. I don't want to go on this stuff, but let's make it. I was there, and you cut me short at 4. I didn't even go to 5. I had everything planned in 4. I wasn't even allowed to go to 5, so I didn't go over my time. I started at 12:30. I understand that I'm unable to think. What I'm saying is, we gave him an expectation to explain to people the importance of this thing, which has 26 sessions. If this was the 7th listening session, then they should have understood why we're holding these sessions. Why would so many people? That was my understanding. Not my understanding is wrong, that's but that was my understanding.
And what I thought what
and
we were doing,
I just want to
there was already
let me finish. Apart from that, I was supposed to bring in the whole color coding experience. All of it in 4 minutes. Everything in 4 minutes. I wasn't even at 4. So, and the numbers that I brought in, were part of the, it was a written set of comments, all measured to 4 minutes. And they were doesn't matter. It's not my, I'm not saying about myself. Thankfully, the vast majority of participants are existing IGF attendees, so they don't need that. There were only a few, I think, only about 20 hands went up. So that's a good thing. I don't have to take them through the color coding because they knew what my only request would be that if you have to first cover the, because you will do questions with everybody rather than letting everybody get one chance. And that's a learning for me. We will do a main session tomorrow. I'm going to make sure the moderators first get everybody to speak and then go to questions. Challenge we have.
I do still think that one should interact with it.
I perfectly agree, but I'm just saying.
But I had half an hour left, less than half an hour left. It was a 1-hour session instead of a 90-minute session.
Oh, I'm gonna have to. What did you do? What did you 4 minutes to
I'm kind of squeeze everything into 1 hour. You should also see that we were lacking half an hour. We didn't have a 90-minute session, but a 60-minute.
Jeanette, some people went for 8 minutes, even speakers. And some went for 3. So I measured it. I had stopwatch on. So it wasn't. Let's not. Those listen again too much in detail. Let's not do that. I just want to say my body was.
Hey, 7, 8, 9, 10.